at least for me, I got to the point where I'm just like, I'm just going to assume that everything I work on from now on is going to get a no, because like that's what was happening anyway. And it's like, especially right now, it's such a risk averse time. So it's like people might say no because the movie's too big or they're not making these types of movies anymore. Yeah, just something I've been talking about online lately, and I think people are responding to it. And yeah, the notion of what you're talking about of people think it's one way, is I think it's partially just because people don't like talking about this stuff because they want to talk about the success and not necessarily like how brutal it is right now.
Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking to Nic Curcio, who is a screenwriter in Hollywood. He is pretty popular on TikTok. He has 110K followers. On YouTube, he has 1.87K followers. He's also the co-host of the Hollywood Hang, a new podcast that he just started. So we welcome him today, and he's got a lot of great insights, especially for us new screenwriters, and I know we're going to all learn a lot. Let's turn it over to Nic. I know for myself, having listened to some of your podcasts, I know a little bit about the film industry, but not very much. And so it's been very insightful to know that. And so what I'm really hoping out of this interview is just sort of give people sort of a realistic idea of what the film industry is like. Because I think a lot of times people are like, you just type a screenplay, you send it into Hollywood, somebody buys it, and you're off and running. And I think that's the biggest myth or hoax that's out there.
100%. Yeah. No, I'm ready to answer whatever questions you have. I mean, that was kind of why I started doing the whole TikTok thing in the first place. And and I hope the podcast becomes a resource for exactly what you're saying.
So talk to me a little bit about how did you get interested in doing movies?
So I've always loved movies my entire life. Going back to like my dad showing me Die Hard as a kid and like Top Gun and stuff like dad movies, like stuff like that. And then when I was in college, I always knew I wanted to do some kind of writing. So I was an English major. I would write a lot of like bad poetry and short stories and stuff like that. And then eventually I took like a screenplay writing class at UCLA. And that was the first time I ever even thought about like, what does a screenplay actually look like? Because the format is so different than like a novel, for example. And then I kind of took a few years off in between my undergrad and my master's program. And that was when I kind of became more interested in like, could I do this as a career? I like the screenplay thing. I like the notion of writing something that could be filmed to be made into a movie. But yeah, it wasn't like a lifelong dream of specifically becoming a screenwriter. It kind of just started with a love of writing and then a transition into like, ooh, what is a screenplay?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the nose there. So like it's a really different form of writing, than what people are used to. What are some of the resources that you have felt that have been good for learning how to do the craft of screenwriting?
I mean, I think the best free resource that I still come back to is the Script Notes podcast. And like I think there are some episodes that are much more just like kind of interviews with writers, and they have all kinds of episodes. But because they've recorded so many over the years, like they have hundreds and hundreds of episodes, there are some great ones. Like I think somewhere on Reddit somebody has pinged like all the numbers of all like the best episodes. Like there's one that's just called, I think it's just called How to Write a Movie, and Craig, it's like an hour long of just Craig doing a monologue where he goes through the entire, kind of like a Spark Notes version of like the entire journey of a movie. And I think I've listened to that many times over the years. That's probably been the single best resource that I've had, at least in terms of classes that you don't have to pay for.
So I'm assuming you got your master's degree in filmmaking. Is that correct? Or what's your master's?
Yes, it was film and TV production.
What was your favorite class in that?
Ooh, no one's ever asked me that before. It Okay, so it's interesting because all of my favorite classes and all my favorite teachers were editing faculty. I didn't take when you're film and TV production, we did have to take some writing classes, but there were like higher level writing classes, a part of the screenwriting department, and I always wanted to take those, but for whatever reason, USC, like they keep it kind of separated. Like I was trying to get into those classes, but I didn't have like high enough, like I wasn't able to get in basically, because they want the screenwriting students to get into those. So I never got to take like, I think it was like somebody who had worked with David Lynch taught like a transcendental screenwriting class. Like there was all these cool classes. I didn't get to take any of those, but all my favorites were editing faculty, and editing kind of became my secondary track at USC just by accident, just because I really liked the teachers and I kept volunteering to edit stuff. But I kind of eventually learned that like writing and editing are super similar, because when you're in the editing room, you're basically doing a final version of the script and you're like erasing beats, adding beats, clarifying beats. So it's kind of very similar. But yeah, it's funny. All my favorite, you would think it would be like screenwriting professors or something, but all my favorite professors and classes were editing classes. Oh, yeah, that's another good question. Yeah, yeah, I think so. I do think so. And yeah, I'm there's one class at USC that they basically get 10 directors together and you make a feature film. It's like the one class at USC where you get to make a feature film. And so each director, directs like a chunk of the movie. And usually that class had an editor who was a professional, somebody who had already graduated. And I was the first ever student to edit the entire movie by myself. So it was like I worked with each director and edited a feature film. It was like the most stressful experience of my entire life, and I wanted to quit a million times. And it even went over schedule, and like I stayed for most of the summer editing this movie for free. I actually paid to take the class, which in hindsight, wasn't a good idea, but it was such a good, just a good experience of like working with 10 different directors, editing their sections over and over, learning more. I kind of forgot how to use Avid, like I use Premiere now, but yeah, it was really interesting, and I do think it helped with the TikToks and all that.
What? So how did you end up getting into the film industry? So you've sort of graduated from school, and I know there's not a real straight line to get into the film industry, but did you get a straight line, or did you have some of their odd jobs before you got in?
I think yeah, my the shape of my trajectory is kind of like a straight line, and then it kind of has veered off in the last few years, in ways that I didn't expect. But yeah, so basically, I went to UCLA. I was an English major. I thought, I was going to be some kind of writer, maybe a novelist or like an English teacher or journalist or something. Took those 2 years off, applied to a bunch of film schools, not really having any film samples, like kind of just on the strength of like, I know I can write stuff. So if they asked for all these different writing samples and stuff like that. And I think I did have a few shorts or just things I had made with friends. I think we had to submit like one little short movie or something. Um, but yeah, so like film school was kind of, I didn't really grow up with like film friends. I didn't have like I wasn't of like the YouTube people, or like I didn't have a ton of people that I could just get together and make movies with. So film school was really an experience in like meeting that whole cohort of people. Kind of just learn, and that was why I wanted to go to film school, and I thought it was worth it money wise for me. Was I just had never really edited something more than 2 minutes long before. I had never thought about, like, I had no idea about lighting, no idea about cameras. So that was a really good experience for me. And then as I was finishing film school, kind of all my internships and assistant jobs and opportunities just came from me randomly reaching out to people. So, for example, my first like real assistant job, there was a USC alumni who had come to a class, and it wasn't even my class; it was one of my friends' classes, and they were like, "I think you would like this guy. He kind of like has like your vibe." And I ended up just DMing this director and being like, "Hey, I'm a USC alumni, or I'm about to graduate from USC. I wasn't in the class that you were in, but I heard it was a cool, speech that you gave, and I just wanted to get coffee with you." And so we ended up getting coffee, and then like that was right when I graduated, and he was like, "Oh, I'm shooting this Hulu pilot in 2 weeks. Do you want to be my assistant?" So, and my other assistant job was kind of the same thing, just somebody that I loved this TV show that they made, and I sent them a DM and I said, "I'm coming out of USC. I'm just looking to be inspired by like the people that I love. Can we get coffee for a few minutes?" And same thing, when a job opened up as an assistant at that company, he hit me up. So I think it was because I was coming out of USC that I was able to position myself to these people and say, I'm leaving school, I am entering the industry, whether I want to or not, and like just kind of asking for those opportunities. And so, yeah, so I went in through the assistant pipeline basically. Um, I was an assistant, I did two assistant jobs, and and then yeah, and then while I was doing the assistant jobs I was also writing, and I did have a manager because I had written a script for fun, not a part of school, so that I would have a sample when I left film school. And yeah, I ended up placing well in like the nickel competition. And so my first manager was somebody who I had also reached out to and said, "Hey, I'm I'm finishing USC. I placed in the top 150 scripts out of however many thousand. Do you want to read this?" Yeah, so I guess it was all kind of just me, and that makes it sound like I just reached out to a couple people and it all happened, but like I emailed a lot of people. Like I had a whole grid of who are all the management companies in town and who are all the managers that I want to be with. And yeah, like most of the time you don't get a response, but it doesn't hurt to just say, you send a quick email that's like, here's who I am, here's a script, you know, buzzword coming out of film school. uh yeah.
So, seeing that, I'm just thinking of the people who don't have that film school background.
Hmm.
So, but I think, um, I think still being able to have the same sort of, like, you have a lot of resilience when it came to this. So you're constantly emailing people, hey, what about this? Or what about this? And so I think one of the things I think amateur screenwriters could take away from this is just say, hey, you got to be persistent. And you're going to be that much more persistent because you don't have the USC film school behind you or any film school behind you.
100%. And I should caveat also, like, when, and it's funny because I just visited one of my USC friends is a teacher now for this like NYU campus that's in LA. It's like a satellite campus, and we got coffee beforehand, and I told him that if if people ask me right now if they should go to film school, I would say no. And he was like, "Oh, don't say that to my students because they are in film school." But no, it's true. Like I not only don't think that you have to go to film school, but I would caution people to be like, do you really want to do this? Because I did go to film school with a lot of people that I think were just like trying to figure out where, like, what they wanted to do, but they were like creative people. And a lot of people like aren't really, they didn't really end up doing much after film school. So I don't know. I think for me it was great because, like I said, I didn't know anything, and I got to like be on a soundstage, learn about cameras, learn about lighting. Um, but yes, to your question, because that's another question I get on TikTok all the time, is like, okay, I'm not going to film school. I have a script. Like, what now? What can I do other than, calling up somebody who has connections or something? And I think that is the one good thing about managers is that in other publishing fields. So, for example, like in if you want to get a literary manager, like you write a novel, it is normal to send cold emails and query book agents. Like that is how most people get book agents. In the film world, you can't really query agents because they have to like want you and feel like they're discovering you, but you can query managers. Like it's super normal to cold query managers in the film industry. So what I would say is, look up the screenwriters that write the types of movies that you like. So if you like, and you'll start to see patterns. Like if you're a comedy writer, there's a place called Three Arts. They rep like tons of comedy writers. Mosaic is another management company, lots of comedy. The company that I'm at, which was used to be called Grandview, now it's Untitled, they're like a big genre company, so they have tons of horror screenwriters. So you'll start to see the types of companies that rep certain types of writers. And usually you can find lists of managers who work at those companies. And usually, like someone who's promoted in the last year or two, someone who's like really up and coming, as hungry as you are, often those people have their emails listed because they do want queries. Like they need to grow their list of people. So it's very normal to query managers in that way. And I think it just comes down to like having a script that you're like, is this the one that I think is so good that I'm going to take my shot shooting out 50 queries, because if you do shoot it out and then someone says, hey, let me read it, and it's like you're not at the level yet, then you've kind of blown. Sometimes they'll be like, I like your writing, send me your next script, which is also very common. But I think it's just a matter of, yeah, figuring out, is my sample, like, have people told me that this is a really good piece of writing? It doesn't need to be like a makeable movie, but just something that's like feels like you, and you're ready to be like have this read on a professional level. And yeah, I think that's like the number one thing that's free and that you don't need connections for would be to cold query managers. But again, you just have to accept that it's a numbers game. I would query like 50 people, and you may hear back from like a fraction of them, and that's normal. Yeah.
Um, was the script that so the script, because I know you got on the blacklist, or
Mhm.
you got a script that was blacklisted. Could you tell people a little bit about what the blacklist is, and then sort of how that process went along?
Yeah, so the blacklist is basically, there's a guy named Franklin Leonard who works in Hollywood, and I think it's been going for maybe like 15, 20 years at this point. But basically, he noticed that every year there were like a stack of favorite scripts. So all the scripts that get sent out every day, Hollywood, um, not all those get purchased, but usually people would say, "Oh, I really loved that script that went out this year," or "Remember that crazy comedy idea that didn't sell, but it was so fun." So he basically just created a list that is the favorite scripts that have come out every year, and it has now evolved into a whole kind of brand that is called the Blacklist. And at the end of each year, all the executives in town vote. So it's like, and you would think that, oh, if they're the favorite scripts, they sold, but they're often things that like didn't sell because they're often like crazy ideas or like brand new writers trying to just throw out a really splashy sample, which was exactly what my script was. So yeah, so that is what the blacklist is now. And then there's also, which I know can be confusing, but it has now grown so big that they have an online component as well. So you can basically pay to host. It's a separate blacklist. So there's like the blacklist, and then there's a website where you can pay to host your script. You can pay to get like an evaluation, and that is another place that sometimes managers or producers will be looking for up and coming writers, is through that portal. But it does, it costs. I don't know how much it is, but it costs money.
And how did it feel to get yours on the blacklist?
Oh man, it was really cool for me because I always say, like, you just don't get a lot of victories as a screenwriter. Even when it seems like somebody says yes to your project, it usually doesn't mean that it's going to like sell and be a movie and all that kind of stuff. So I was still an assistant when it happened, and so it just yeah, it was like one of the highlights of my career thus far, just because it just felt like a win in a time when I really needed a win, and I was a really stressed out assistant. And yeah, my boss was like very excited on my behalf, and it was just great. It was a highlight.
So you sort of touched on one aspect that I don't think a lot of people realize is you can be a successful screenwriter in Hollywood and never have a movie made. Can you want to talk about more about that?
Yeah, yeah. So it's another thing that I think, like you said, it's kind of hard for people to wrap their heads around, because I get a lot of TikTok comments that are like, "Oh, you have screenwriter in your name, but like, where are your movies?" and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so basically, from the writers that I know, and from like the numbers that I've seen, it usually seems to me to be somewhere between 5 and 10 years of working professionally for most writers before one of their movies comes out. And that is like getting paid to write scripts. So the reason for that is that statistically, if you think about like a studio pays X number of writers per year to write scripts, when all those get turned in, only a fraction of them are going to end up the way they wanted them to end up. And so they're going to say, okay, that is still a really cool idea for a movie, but we don't really like that script. Let's find somebody else to rewrite that script. This other idea, those types of movies aren't working with audiences anymore, or like this just bombed at the box office, so that project's gone. So, and then it's like maybe they have one project that they want to move forward with, but actually we think we like the idea, but we think it needs tweaks. So let's also hire somebody else to work on that project. So that just goes on and on and on, to the point where the projects that are still alive keep getting tweaked. And then sometimes like you get your name bumped off, sometimes you don't, but so few of them actually make it through to the end out of all the scripts that have been purchased, that yeah, it ends up being that most writers make most of their money on movies that don't see the screen. And it's just, yeah, it's really, especially movies like TV shows. I don't really work in TV, but it seems to me that um, like if you put together, well, I guess this is changing nowadays, but usually if you're going to spend the money and like put together a writer's room, typically your show is like on its way to being, made. But movies, yeah, like there are way more just dead movie projects because yeah, that's just kind of the nature of the game. And like studios have to keep buying pitches and buying movies, and but they're not willing to greenlight all of those, just a very small fraction.
So I know one of your movies is actually going to be out next year, and I know you're pretty excited about that. I'm assuming because you put it on TikTok, we can talk about it briefly. I
Yes,
know.
yes, yes.
So tell me a little bit more about how that happened, where you're able to get into this, to get the job to do the writing, and just sort of what the and like what was the contract for, and not the money
Hmm.
wise, but you know what I mean. Just sort of like you write, you get paid sort of X amount of dollars for working on it for 6 months or
Hmm.
something like that.
Yeah, so basically, that script that we were talking about that was on the blacklist, that was the end of 2019 that I sort of did that cycle of um, it was like 100 it was like 100 general meetings in the end because I got agents and then they sent the script to like a million people. So I was still an assistant, I was doing all these general meetings. Everybody was loving my script, but I was still like broke and like not being paid as a writer. And then I went in to Sony Animation because I had heard that they read the script and they like needed a writer as soon as possible, somebody with kind of like a fun voice for this comedy. And I ended up going in and they pitched me this movie and they said this is a movie they're doing with Steph Curry's company. It's this animated sports movie and it's a comedy. It's kind of a coming of age story, and like it had a lot in common with my sample, which is usually what happens. Like they like this thing, and then it's like, oh, you'd be perfect for this similar thing. Um, and originally, I actually said they like I didn't even have to really pitch. Like I told them like, oh yeah, here's what I think or here's what I would do, but I didn't have to like go in and give a whole 20-minute pitch as you would usually do and like beg somebody to hire you. Like they just really liked me and they were like, we want you to start right away. Which has never happened to me again before and usually never happens to anyone. Um, and I actually I politely said no to the position because like I was so in assistant mode that I was like, well, it'll be inconvenient to my bosses if I leave. And so my team had to like call me and say, dude, you have an offer to like be a screenwriter. Like you have to do this. And I was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was kind of just, I was, yeah, in that like assistant mode of like, I need to be doing this forever until, but, so yeah, I worked at Sony Animation for like from 2020 to late 2021 on this project. And in terms of the contract thing, animation is very different. So like if I write a studio feature film, usually it's like you're getting paid X amount of money and you get half of it when you start writing and half of it when you turn in the script. And usually it ends up being a long time before you turn in the script and get paid for that. Even though I think technically that's against, like, that's not supposed to happen, but it does. It's just the way it happens. Um, so for animation, it's like, at least my contract was you get paid every month, which is like a writer's dream. Like you never get paid every month as a screenwriter. And I think I was on like 6 month incremental contracts. So it would just be like, I get paid six times, once a month for 6 months, and then we would decide to renew or what the terms were going to be at the end of the 6 months. Um, so yeah, it was, and I think the reason it is that way is because like if I'm writing a studio movie, like you kind of just disappear and go write it. And when you're on an animated movie, it was kind of a full-time job. Like we would Zoom during traditional office hours like almost every day. And then I would write and then we would do Zoom again and talk about the pages. So it was a little bit more like a writer's room, which is why they're paying you to like be a contracted screenwriter. Um, but yeah, the movie was very fun. It's like I said, animated sports comedy. It wasn't greenlit when I was working on it, so I was like, I didn't know if they were ever going to make the movie because live action, they're developing a ton of stuff, most of which doesn't go. Um, so yeah, eventually I moved on to some other projects, and then one day I heard like I think I was getting coffee with the guy at Sony who hired me, and he was like, "Oh yeah, it's greenlit. Like it's coming out in a year or two." And I was like, "Oh my god!" Like so. Yeah, it'll be really interesting. Like, from another funny thing that's happening right now is like my followers, people, somebody just DM'd me and said, "Oh, I just sent in like an audition of my voice for the movie to be like one of the roles or something." So I keep getting updates about it through random people that follow me. And I was talking to somebody else who was like, "Oh yeah, I saw a cut of the movie," and I was like, "I haven't even seen a cut of the movie, like draw the drawings version." Um, but yeah, it's very exciting, and I've also been transparent about like um, animation is also famously like not covered by the WGA. So typically, when you write a movie, when it's done, they like look at all the scripts, and then the WGA says like, okay, this person gets credit, this person gets a story credit, etc. This one's going to be very different because it's not covered. So I don't know. I have no idea if I'm going to get like a story credit, a regular credit, have to apply for like the additional writer credit. But I think that if a scenario does happen, because I'm just excited the movie's coming out, and I learned so much working on it. So I think if a situation like that did happen, which would cause everyone on TikTok to be like, "Hey, what happened to your movie?" I think it would just be a good opportunity for like an educational TikTok where I say, "Hey, this is like sometimes what happens. This is a normal part of being a screenwriter. Like, I'm not mad. Like, everyone knows that I like had a lot of fun working on this movie, and I helped them chug it along. And yeah, it happens. There's a screenwriter named Mattson Tomlin who's an amazing writer, but he I remember that he had been announced to be the Batman writer for like a year before it came out, and it was like all his interviews, people were asking about Batman and all this stuff, and then the movie finally came out, and he got zero credit on it, which I'm sure he was bummed about. But it was like the WGA decided that because of the drafts or for whatever reason. But everybody understands that like that is normal. That happens. That doesn't mean that he wasn't a writer on it. It just means that it's the way that credits work. Um, so yeah, if that happens, I will be, it's totally fine, and I'll make a little educational video talking about it maybe.
So what are you doing? Can I ask what you're doing right now besides the podcast and the TikToks? What else are you working for on any particular projects or?
Yeah, I have. So I got a new manager, or I went to a new management company like a year or two ago, and I kind of just wanted to make a change in my career, and I wanted to focus a lot more on horror. And I thought the best way to do that was to kind of be at a company that has a lot of really cool horror writers, and to kind of like restart my career with like a brand new horror script. So, which is, you kind of always have to do that as a screenwriter, like kind of restart your career and like send out a brand new fresh thing that redefines you, and it reminds people that you exist. So we've been developing this horror script for, I think I just checked my emails, like 9 months or something. Cause it's like I sent all the ideas, and then we did like treatments over and over for a while, and really figured out what the movie would be. And it changed a lot. And then I wrote like a million drafts of it. Um, so like as of like right before this call, I saw the list of like, here's all the people we're about to send it to this week. So that'll go out this week, and that'll kind of start a new cycle of like what screenwriters do, which is I'll probably meet, even if the people don't like bite on the script, usually meet with all these people and say, what else are you working on? Like, let's develop something together. Here's like a remake or some IP I have that we want you to pitch on. So yeah, I think it'll be cool because I've done so much comedy. The animated movie was comedy. I wrote this Magic School Bus movie, which was like a family comedy. Um, and I did like a comic book thing that was comedy. So it'll be fun to kind of have just something new out there that I don't think people have seen from me before. And I kind of wrote the script in a really stylized way, and it's very like dark. It's like a proper sort of gritty horror film. So yeah, I'm just excited to like finally send that out, and like dying to hear what people think about it. Yeah, exactly.
Paid to do that right now, correct? You're not having to do a second job while you write right now, do you? Or do you have a second job?
No, yeah, I have I write for like an audio series. It's all like, uncredited stuff like that. But it's funny, yeah, I have made a lot of TikToks recently about like the state of the industry and people doing side hustles. And because like everyone that I've met with recently, I met with this great director the other day, someone that I met through TikTok, And like that was our first point of discussion. Is he was like, "What are your side hustles? Here are my side hustles." And it's like people have the most random, cool side hustles. But yeah, everybody has something. Like it's just for whatever reason, like people don't talk about it because I think everybody wants to give the impression that like they're being paid to do their dream job. And like I also just made a TikTok about this, but like at the beginning of my career I thought, oh yeah, like you just bounce from writing job to writing job like as a screenwriter. But it doesn't really work like that. Even for like really successful people, there are just huge gaps. And there was just an article about the TV industry and like TV writers, it's down like 43% or something. So it's like, yeah, a lot. I think that is another thing that I feel like is important to just be transparent about is that like I have friends that I would say are way more successful than me and have written bigger movies than me and gotten more movies made than me. And like they have a bunch of other things they're doing just to make money because yeah, it's not a stable thing, but it is also uh like when you're writing spec scripts and you're just writing it for free and writing it for yourself and you say, okay, 6, 9 months from now, I want to be sending something out, you kind of just work on it when you get free time, you know? So yeah, I'm lucky enough to have like a side writing thing where I write for this sort of audio podcast. And, I also, TikTok is like another version of my side hustle. Yeah, and then like the podcast is very new. It's not really a side hustle, but more of just like a side hobby that people asked for and demanded that we that we do. So yeah, it's a lot of random things. But I think it's just that's just what you have to do. And like even when I was an assistant, like I always kind of tell myself, at least I'm not an assistant anymore because it's just so like it is a really really stressful job. And I was writing so hard and so productively because I was like, I need to get off the assistant desk. But I think the best side hustles are ones that don't completely stress you out, because then you have no like creative juice left to go do your passion. So I think yeah, I think a lot of writers have like non-writing side jobs because then they can just clear their heads. And yeah, but there was a guy, I forget his name, but there was like, did you see that viral LinkedIn post recently about the editor? He basically he was the editor of like the Garfield movie that came out a few years ago, and he had this viral LinkedIn post because it was like a selfie of him going to work at Trader Joe's, and it was a very like on the surface it seemed depressing, but it was actually a really inspiring post. And he was talking about the same thing. He was like, I have not been able to find a job as the lead editor on any movie since Garfield made like $250 million. It was like a huge hit for kids. um, and he just couldn't find another job. And he said, like, I've been working at Trader Joe's, like I work with amazing people, I still find ways to be creative. So yeah, I think a couple years ago it was the same situation, and it's always been unstable. But like right now, especially, it is really, really brutal for writers, directors. Even I've even heard in the commercial world, because I know a lot of directors make their side money off directing like commercials, but I've heard that even that stuff is like very, very dried up right now. So yeah, it's I was lucky enough to do this for a couple years straight and just like get a couple jobs and be like, oh, I'm so good at being a screenwriter. This is so easy. Like all I have to do is like pitch on these candy bars and board games and like get these jobs. And yeah, sometimes you just get lucky for a couple years and then. But I think that is also what defines your experience, is like if you keep going when those gaps happen, and I get it. There are people who have like families, kids to feed. So sometimes people have to just kind of pivot and be like, this is not for me. Like I need some version of stability. But um yeah, I love writing scripts and I love writing all kinds of stuff. And so that's kind of all I plan on doing.
I think I like that, in that you're sort of telling people sort of the realistic view. I think people are still stuck in the 80s and the early 90s where you'd just send a spec script in and boom, you get $1 million and hey, there you go. And I think people are still stuck in that mindset and they don't understand where the industry is right now. So
100%. Yeah. And it's even, again, I don't write TV, but like I know a lot of TV writers talk about how back in the day, like the period you're talking about, if you got lucky enough to be on a show, usually every season of that show was like, sometimes it was like 22 episodes. So you're employed for a huge amount of time. There was more seasons and the residuals were really good. So like it is very different now. It's like you're lucky enough to get in one writer's room and like maybe you get 8 episodes. It's like a limited series, so it's like it is for feature film writers and TV writers really hard. And yeah, I think that has kind of been, um, yeah, just something I've been talking about online lately, and I think people are responding to it. And yeah, the notion of what you're talking about of people think it's one way, is I think it's partially just because people don't like talking about this stuff because they want to talk about the success and not necessarily like how brutal it is right now and like how people are dropping and all that. So, but I think that people should know because I'm not, if they want to be writers and chase the dream, you absolutely should. But I think being realistic about the money thing, to me, I think it could be freeing because um, that's kind of the way I view it now. And like for a few years, I was so stressed because I was like, time is passing and I'm burning through the money I got from my last studio job. And where's the new studio job? And like, what if I don't get it? So like, I think it becomes freeing to know that even the professionals are not making like steady income, and that everyone is having to do other things. And I think, yeah, I think it's like you can hopefully detach from the money side of it a little bit, figure out what your regular job is going to be, and then be like, during all my free time I'm going to be writing, and I'm just going to devote this year to writing like one great script. Yeah.
yeah, no, I think it's good that I think the reason why people don't talk about it, I think, is more just they just don't know what to ask. I mean, they have this expectation. They see Hollywood, they just see dollar signs, and they don't understand that Hollywood is more than that. And writers, especially, they don't normally get a lot of the fruits of the labor too. I mean, they're not movie stars, and so even though I
Mhm.
think screenwriters are movie stars because they create the stories. Hollywood doesn't see it that way, and screenwriters aren't generally, that $1 million script is more like a lottery ticket type of thing than anything else. It's not something that's common.
Yeah, yeah, and there are, even in the last like 6 months, I think there was one really big script sale that was like a new writer who had never sold anything before, and it was like $1 million sale or something. But I love when that happens because it's like we could all win the lottery, even though probably not. But that's what keeps people going, and it's like you never know. Like this could be the script. It depends on a lot of factors, but no, I agree with you. Yeah, screenwriters are kind of the people listening to this who love screenwriting. There are probably screenwriters that they love, and they seek out interviews with those people. But yeah, for the most part, you're right. We're not movie stars. We're kind of like the faceless people that just write movies, and then sometimes they get made, and then sometimes we don't get credited, and sometimes we do. Um, which is, yeah, that's kind of another thing that a lot of people have brought up to me about the TikTok thing is like just not normal for screenwriters to like get on and do something like that and show their face and put a green screenplay image in the background and like but I yeah, I've had a lot of fun doing it, and I think the only reason why I'm able to do it is just because I've like pitched a million times, and like in a way that is kind of like performing, and so I think I've gotten over maybe the camera shyness of it, but because yeah, pitching is like brutal.
Well, how about you talk to us about a pitching session as a screenwriter? What does that look like?
Yeah, yeah. So the first thing I would say is like I am somebody who it seems to me that there are two types of screenwriters. people that pitch a lot or people that don't really pitch at all. Like on open, I'm talking about like on open assignments. So early in my career, I think I just established myself as like somebody with a lot of crazy ideas. So if you're having trouble breaking a movie that's based on like this candy bar and like no one can really figure out, it's like, oh, get Nick to pitch on this because he'll give you a crazy idea and it'll also be like a good movie. And so I kind of became like that person. So I pitched on like a lot of IP. And at the beginning of my career, yeah, like I was like, this is great. Like I know how to do this. And then I have slowly learned that you have to really be careful about how many times you say yes to doing these things. But pitching in general as an art, I want to talk more about it on like the podcast and TikTok because it's there's just so much on the subject. But it is kind of like I said, it's half of a performance. So like it's very unfair that screenwriters have to do this because we're not actors. But part of it is really like performing the movie to an audience and like getting them excited about it. Um, there's different kinds of pitches. So like if I have a general meeting, I might have sort of like a 2 minute pitch just in case they ask me what I'm working on. Or if they ask, what's your dream project? And I sort of have that little 2 minute pitch. And then sometimes you have the projects where they say, hey, we have the rights to this thing. Do you have a take on this? And the goal of that is to build a fully fleshed out pitch that you would hopefully take to the studio to get paid to write it. And when you have one of those, you're talking like you talk about earlier. You said like back in the day, you get paid $1 million for a spec. Like from what I've heard, pitches used to be 5-10 minutes, and you would kind of just wing it, and they'd be like, "Hey, $1 million." But now it's you really have to have like the entire thing figured out. Like it is really annoying, especially if you're a fast writer, because I feel like I could write the whole script much faster than it would take to pitch. Because when you're working on a pitch, you have to do like you pitch the lower level executive, they give you notes. Then you pitch the one up, they give you notes. Then you pitch the head honcho, they give you notes, and then you all take it into the studio, and then they either say yes or no, or they give you notes and say come back, which has also happened to me. So it's like I've had projects that have taken 11 months to pitch. There was a video game that I did, and I probably pitched it over 10 times, so like maybe once a month, and it just kept going up the chain, and then I got to the final two and then I didn't get it. And so I was kind of like I could have written many scripts in that time. So yeah, it's really hard, but I do think it's good to just practice. Like if you're a writer, you should be good at telling your idea to somebody. But it is very hard, and it's always struck me as very unfair that writers who are categorically not performers are forced to perform. The Zoom thing has honestly helped me a little bit because it's just like there are pros and cons. Like it's harder to keep someone's attention on the screen, but the pro would be like you can have your notes up. Whereas if I'm going to sit in the studio, you can have like your iPad with you, but people try to keep the eye contact and all that. So there's pros and cons, but yeah, like I've never met a writer who's like, oh, I love pitching. Like maybe a few times, but I think everybody hates it, and even executives hate it. They're like, it's awkward. It's like how directors talk about how awkward auditions are. It's like this person comes in, thank you, 2 minutes. Next person comes in. Like it's just like a thing that we have to do, but it's just uncomfortable.
Um, how do you keep all the resilience you have? Because writers, I made a short YouTube short, which is basically, I think I had 100 no's in there, and finally the one yes. How do you keep your resilience in the face of all this no's?
There are a lot of no's. There are so many. I think like kind of kind of like how I was talking about before about how it got to a certain point where I understood, oh, you're not just going to bounce from job to job and like get those yeses. There also became a point where I realized like you get so many no's in a row that you're like, at least for me, I got to the point where I'm just like, I'm just going to assume that everything I work on from now on is going to get a no. Because like that's what was happening anyway. And it's like, especially right now, it's such a risk averse time. So it's like people might say no because the movie's too big, or they're not making these types of movies anymore, or these movies are really risky, or I broke in with a coming of age script and I wanted to write coming of age John Hughes movies, and immediately learned that people will say no to those because you can't put a movie star in a film about somebody who's in high school because you're probably going to cast some young actor. So it's like, but we need movie star. We need Glenn Powell. Who's Glenn Powell supposed to play? So it's like I've learned all those things that can cause you to get a no. But even if you do the opposite of all that and you have something that you think is amazing, you could also just get a no because no is the default. Like also when I was an assistant and I would hear, or like an intern, and I would hear all the ideas that the execs would say no to, I think it just helped me realize like it's not personal. It's just that they have to say no to most things. And they have to really, really love something to say yes. And it's just very rare for them to say yes. So, um, yeah, I think it's like, I don't know if that's helpful to people, but I just had to look at it in terms of like, assume you are going to get a no. And you should love your script and your project so much that it's okay if you get a no. And you're writing it for you, because if you're writing it just to get a yes, which I've also done, it's like, oh, I'll write this like studio comedy that's like a buddy comedy, and I think people will love this. Like, you're just not. It doesn't fill you with the same creative juice because you're writing it because you think you're going to get a yes. Um, but I think there's a lot of like left of center films that I love, like Barbarian or something, that are like so weird. That movie apparently got like 200 passes from production companies before somebody said yes. So it's like those are the types of movies that um, sometimes the really unique stuff, it's getting a no because it's unique and nobody wants to take the chance. But then when they do, everybody's like, oh, now everybody in town is like, what's our version of Barbarian? Like, so now they all want that. So it's like, um, but yeah, that's what I try to tell myself is just, I'm just going to assume it's going to be a no.
Since I'm a screenwriting software channel, I have to ask, what do you use and why?
So I've used different softwares throughout my screenwriting career. I began with Final Draft and I now use Final Draft again. However, I am very aware that final it's controversial, and I've heard the script notes episode where, because Craig Mazin hates Final Draft and he makes that very clear. And there was an episode where he brought the guys on and like fought with them about how bad Final Draft is. And yeah, no, all my friends are always like, my Final Draft crashed again. And I know it's like really ridiculous that they make you pay for the updated versions. So for a while, in a form of protest, I was on Fade In for most of film school. Actually, I was using Fade In. I loved it. I loved the interface. There was something about it that just made sense to me. And eventually, I got to the point where people kept saying, "We need the Final Draft version for the production breakdown." So I just got bullied into using Final Draft again, which is, people when people ask for the file, and I think there's like programs you can use to convert the files and stuff, right? But unfortunately, I'm back on Final Draft.
What question should I have asked you tonight that I didn't ask you?
Whoa, that's another good question. Uh, uh, I don't know. I think you had some really good questions. I mean, I love I just love talking about all this stuff, and I am happy that you asked about the kind of alternative paths that like don't involve film school and the things that I did, because I do that is another thing that I hear a lot on TikTok is like people are like, well, your perspective is somebody who went to this film school and it has a flashy name, and a lot of people like aren't necessarily in LA or going to film school, and I think in a weird way the world that we live in now has made itself so that people can break in from anywhere because everything is like on Zoom. And so I think it used to be like you really wanted to be in LA to bump arms with somebody at some party, and they end up being a producer who's going to hand your script to somebody. But ever since the pandemic had everything go online, um, every meeting I have, every pitch that I do, it seems like everything's just going to stay on Zoom forever, at least as an option. Like no one's ever going to say you have to be here in person. So I think it is kind of cool because it's given an opportunity to people that like aren't in Hollywood and don't live here. And um, yeah, so I think there's an opportunity to really break in, to find a manager, um, and you could just be anywhere.